History stands witness. Every empire that believed itself unconquerable eventually saw its pride shattered into dust. Rome fell, Persia crumbled, and when the Mongol storm rose, no wall on earth could stand against it. Not a single one. The successors of Genghis Khan unleashed in a single generation the kind of devastation no conqueror had achieved in centuries. They turned civilization to ash. But in the year 1256, while the embers of Baghdad were still warm, a river of fire came rushing toward the sacred city of Medina. It tore through mountains. It swallowed plains. And then, at the very gates of the city of the Prophet, it stopped. There was no fortress, no army, no human barrier. It just stopped. And then came the most terrifying moment of all. The same Mongol army whose swords still dripped with the caliph's blood, the army that had drowned the greatest library of knowledge in the Tigris River, turned its gaze toward the west, toward Mecca, toward Medina. Nothing stood between them and the two holiest cities on earth. Nothing, except one slave. The year is 654 AH, 1256 CE. Madinah al-Munawwara, the sacred city whose streets once felt the blessed footsteps of the Prophet. The city whose very soil vibrates with the light of prophethood. That night, the city lay in its usual peaceful silence. The minarets of Masjid-e-Nabawi shimmered under moonlight. The date palm gardens were wrapped in quiet. And then, the earth shook. When the first tremor struck, the people of Medina thought it was an ordinary earthquake. But it was anything but ordinary. Tremor followed tremor. Days passed. Nights came and went. Then one night, the eastern sky turned blood red. A deep, heavy, burning crimson, as if the very belly of the earth was erupting with the wrath of God. Harat Rahat, that ancient, rocky, black wasteland that had been dead for centuries, had awakened. The great historian Allama ibn Katheer recorded this terrifying scene in his monumental work Al-Bidaya wal-Nihaya. The people of Medina saw a tremendous fire in the direction of Hira, flowing between the mountains like a river. Its light was so intense it was visible for miles, and they felt its heat on their own faces. That boiling river of lava moved, slowly, heavily, mercilessly, toward Medina, burning through everything in its path across a 23-kilometer field of destruction. People as far as Khaybar, 150 kilometers away, could see the hellish glow dancing across the sky. Terror spread through the city. Mothers clutched their children and ran into the streets. The elderly recited the kalima on their lips. And that fire, wearing the shadow of death, drew closer and closer. But an even more terrifying storm was building on the eastern horizon. And the only one who could stop that flood was a single slave. His birth name was Mahmud bin Mamdud, but history remembers him by another name, Saifuddin Qutuz. According to tradition, he was born in the royal lands of Khorazm, the son of a noble family, raised in the light of a princely household. But when the Mongol hooves crushed Khorazm into rubble, this young prince was shackled in chains by the same Mongols whose bloodthirsty screams had echoed through the skies of his city, by the same beasts who had turned his home to ashes. Bought and sold, kicked and traded, Qutuz arrived in the slave markets of Egypt. And there, in the elite Mamluk slave army, which the Ayyubid sultans of Egypt had built into the steel backbone of their empire, he carved his own place. Not through connections, not through favoritism, through his sword, through iron will, through blood and sweat. And then in 657 AH, the wheel of fate turned, and he rose to sit on the throne of Egypt as sultan. But the moment he took power, a trembling piece of news reached him, news that had paralyzed the entire Islamic world. Baghdad, the beating heart of the Abbasid Caliphate for 5 centuries, shattered and destroyed by Mongol savagery. Caliph Al-Mu'tasim Billah, the 37th and final Abbasid caliph, had been executed with horrifying cruelty.
And now Hulagu Khan's savage army had turned its face toward the west.
Sweat appeared on Qutuz's forehead. He closed his eyes, and after a long, heavy silence, he stood up. But before we move forward, we must sit with the grief of Baghdad. Because until you feel the depth of those wounds. The greatness of the victory at Ain Jalut will never reach your soul.
January 656 AH.
Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, perhaps the most ruthless conqueror in human history, arrived at the walls of Baghdad with an army of over 150,000. Alongside him marched Armenian and Georgian Christian allies. This was the dark political reality of that age. Alliances were built not on faith, but on hunger for power and thirst for blood. Hulagu's own wife, Dokuz Khatan, was an Nestorian Christian, and her enthusiasm for destroying Muslim empires was no secret. Inside the caliph's court, no serious plan for peace, no organized would a fight. Imam al-Dhahabi wrote, with deep sorrow in Tarikh al-Islam, that cowardice and disorder had so completely infected the caliph's ministers that when Hulagu's messenger arrived, the only thing that happened in the palace was ministers pointing fingers at each other. On January 29, 1258, the siege began. In just 13 days of resistance, the centuries-old walls of Baghdad crumbled to the ground. And then what followed is the darkest page in human history. For 40 days, the massacre continued. Hundreds of thousands, by the careful estimates of Ibn Katheer and Imam al-Dhahabi, were slaughtered one by one like animals. The waters of the Tigris River first turned black from the ink of millions of precious books of the House of Wisdom. Centuries of knowledge hurled into the river. And then those same waters turned red with the blood of the martyrs. Allama ibn al-Atheer wrote in Al-Kamil fit-Tarikh with trembling hands, "I wish my mother had never given birth to me, so I would never have seen this day. Let whoever writes of this event weep tears of blood, for no pen is adequate." Caliph al-Mu'tasim was captured and brought before Hulagu. The Mongols had a strange superstition that royal blood must not touch the ground. So the caliph of the Islamic world was wrapped in thick felt and crushed under the hooves of Mongol horses. February 20th, 1258. The 500-year-old Abbasid Caliphate, which had lit the sun of knowledge and civilization over the world, ended. In a moment, in a single day, Syria was in grave danger. The gates of Palestine stood wide open, and between the holy lands of Mecca and Madinah and the bloodthirsty army of Hulagu Khan, nothing remained. In the year 657 AH, four messengers of Hulagu Khan arrived at the court of Cairo. Their message was the same one Hulagu had sent to every king on earth, and before which every king had bowed his head. The letter dripped with arrogance. "We have reddened the earth with blood and orphaned its children. Bow before us, or face the same fate as Baghdad." A deathly silence fell over Qutuz's court. Great generals and ministers stared at each other. The very air in the room seemed to have stopped. Would Qutuz submit to? Was there any power left on earth capable of facing this storm? Sultan Qutuz listened to the message in silence. Then he rose and issued an order no one had expected. Hulagu's messengers were arrested. At the famous Bab Zawela gate of Cairo, two of the messengers were beheaded and their heads hung at the gate. The other two were crucified. Imam al-Maqrizi recorded this shocking event in detail in his book Al-Suluk. This was no ordinary decision. This was a direct declaration of war against the most terrifying and ruthless army in the history of the world. Qutuz's generals asked, trembling, "Sultan, can we really fight these monsters?" Qutuz looked them in the eyes and said only this: "If you will not fight to defend Islam, then I will fight alone." 25th of Ramadan, 658 AH, September 3rd, 1260 CE, just before dawn. Location: Wadi Jezreel, the Jezreel Valley, Palestine. This was the same historic valley the world knew as Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath. This ground had already once witnessed the decision between truth and falsehood. The cold morning mist was rolling down from the hills. The breath of horses rose like steam in the air. Approximately 12,000 to 15,000 Mamluk soldiers stood like a silent iron wall, awaiting their fate. And at their head stood Sultan Saifuddin Qutuz. Imam al-Maqrizi writes that just before battle, Qutuz performed ablution. He prayed 2 voluntary units of prayer. Then he fell into prostration. For a very long time, the soldiers watched in silence as their sultan refused to lift his head from the ground. When he finally rose, his eyes were filled with tears, and on his lips was one prayer alone. He turned to his army and spoke the words that Maqrizi's pen preserved forever. "O people, whoever intends martyrdom for the sake of Islam, let him follow me." And then, the Mongol army of Kitbuga Noyan appeared on the horizon. Kitbuga, Hulagu Khan's most senior general, a hardline Nestorian Christian. His hands were stained with the blood of hundreds of thousands of Muslims in Baghdad. This was the Mongol army that had never, in all of history, tasted defeat. The battle began. Rukn al-Din Baybar's Al-Bun Duktari, Qutuz's most brilliant and dangerous commander, led the center. He employed the same military tactic the Mongols themselves used, the feigned retreat. The Mamluk center fought while slowly pulling back, and the Mongol army, drunk on the scent of victory, charged forward into the depths of the valley, exactly where Qutuz's hidden flanking units were waiting. Suddenly, from both sides of the valley hills, cavalry came thundering down. A devastating ambush closed in from both directions. But the Mongols were not easy to break. With stunning speed, they reorganized. Their counterattack was so ferocious that the Mamluk center began to buckle. For one moment, just one single moment in history, it seemed as though the last fortress of Islam would fall, that the Mongols would win. And in that terrifying moment, Qutuz did what no ruler in history does. In the words of Allama al-Maqrizi, Qutuz tore off his iron helmet and hurled it to the ground. He raised his bare sword toward the sky, and alone, yes, completely alone, he spurred his horse directly into the blood-soaked Mongol ranks. His thundering cry echoed across the valley of Ain Jalut. "Wa Islamah! Wa Islamah! O my Islam! O my Islam!" That cry, "Wa Islamah!" echoed through this valley so powerfully that even the heavens trembled. And then what happened is counted among the greatest miracles in human history. Seeing Qutuz's reckless, fearless charge, his generals and commanders rushed forward one by one to become his shield. The Mamluk morale erupted. The entire army let out a thunderous takbir, Allahu Akbar. The Mongol iron lines that had never broken scattered like sand. Kitbuga Noyan, Hulagu's so-called invincible general, was captured and killed with humiliation. On the 25th of Ramadan, a former slave had, for the first time in history, crushed the pride of the undefeatable Mongol army into dust. This was not just a victory. This was the verdict of the universe. Allama ibn Katheer wrote, "And Allah gave the Muslims on that day a victory the like of which no one had even hoped for." The Mongol army that had crossed the Euphrates fled and never returned. And thus, Medina al-Munawwara was protected. Qutuz entered Damascus as a conqueror. The city threw open its gates. People poured into the streets with joy. People who had lived for months in terror of Hulagu. People whose eyes still held the burning ash of Baghdad. Today, they saw their liberator, the Prophet's city. But see the cruel irony of fate. Qutuz did not celebrate long. On the return journey, October 1260, just weeks after Ain Jalut, while on a hunt, his own General Baybar's Al-Bun Duktari and other commanders conspired and assassinated Sultan Qutuz. Imam al-Maqrizi recorded this betrayal in full detail. The first blow was struck by Baybar's himself. What was the motive? A promised governorship of Aleppo? Or that eternal political hunger for power? The hunger that even the greatest victory can never satisfy? It is true that Baybars went on to become one of Egypt's greatest sultans, standing as Islam's final shield against the Crusaders and earning his place in history. But the stain of Qutuz's blood on history's pages remains fresh to this day. Qutuz never saw Cairo's throne again. He never celebrated his greatest victory. The slave who stopped the Mongols died on a desert road, drowning in his own blood at the hands of his own people. But Medina al-Munawwara stands to this day. The minarets of Masjid-i-Nabawi still ring with the call to prayer. And that fire, which erupted from Harat Rahat in 1256, which had consumed 23 kilometers of land, stopped at the very borders of the Haram. as if an unseen hand had held it back. Imam al-Maqrizi, Imam al-Dhahabi, and Allama ibn Katheer, three of the greatest historians of Islam, reading both events together, the fire and the Mongols, reached one single conclusion. Medina was protected, and protected in a way no other city on earth has ever been protected. In Sahih Muslim, in the Book of Tribulations, the Prophet said, "The Dajjal will come to Medina, but he will find angels guarding it. Neither the Dajjal nor plague shall enter Medina." Allama ibn Katheer wrote, and this was among the greatest of signs, that Allah turned that fire away from the sanctuary of his prophet. What men can see, Allah sees beyond. Qutuz was known to no one. He was a slave of unknown lineage, unknown future. But Allah had prepared him for the exact moment when the entire Ummah needed him most. The Mongols made him a slave, and Allah made that very slave their destroyer. O Allah, as you save Medina al-Munawwara from fire and from the sword, protect this city until the day of judgment. As you raised Qutuz from his helplessness, raise this Ummah from its helplessness. Ameen. If this story reached your heart, then pass it on. This is the right of that slave, Badruddin Qutuz, who left this world without a single celebration in his honor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, WA Islamah, so that cry echoes once more.